thought it was clickbait. 3I Atlas is leaking so much water it shouldn't exist. Sounds impossible, right? But it's not. It's happening right now out there. Beyond Mars, where sunlight is too weak to melt anything, where ice should stay frozen for eternity. Yet somehow, this interstellar visitor is spewing water into space like a broken fire hydrant in the void, 40 kilograms every single second. NASA calls it a mystery. Physicists call it a paradox. But the truth? Something about 3I Atlas is rewriting the rules of existence itself. And it's only getting stranger. Before we begin, feel free to let us know in the comments what time it is for you and where you're listening from. We love staying connected with our community. Now, it's time to close your eyes. Let's begin. You think you understand 3I Atlas? You think it's just another comet, frozen, harmless, predictable? You're wrong. Because what NASA's Gehrels Swift Observatory saw in July 2025 shouldn't be possible. From 2.9 astronomical units away, nearly 3 times the Earth-Sun distance, Swift detected the ultraviolet fingerprint of water. Real water. Molecules tearing apart into hydroxyl under sunlight so faint it shouldn't even tickle the surface. That distance is too far for ice to melt, too cold for vapor, too dead for activity. Yet the data screamed one word: leaking. 40 kilograms every second. A fire hose running full blast in the middle of nowhere. Astronomers ran the numbers again. Same result. The comet was alive, 8% of its surface active, when the most energetic comets in our solar system barely reach 5. It was bleeding oceans into the void. And the leak wasn't random, it was steady, rhythmic, controlled, like a system maintaining pressure. That's not how comets behave. That's how machines behave. Scientists tried to make sense of it. Maybe it's icy debris orbiting the core, venting gas like tiny steam valves. Maybe chunks of ice fractured free and vaporized mid-flight. But the math doesn't hold. The glow was too bright, the emissions too consistent, the behavior too deliberate. So here's the question nobody wants to ask. What's powering it? What's keeping it warm when every known law says it should be frozen to silence? Because this isn't just a comet leaking water. It's an object broadcasting defiance, molecule by molecule. And if 3I Atlas is defying the universe this early in its journey, what's it preparing for when it gets closer to the sun? You've been told comets are simple. Ice and dust, drifting relics from the solar system's birth, asleep until sunlight wakes them. But 3I Atlas just proved that definition worthless. Because in the cold dark beyond Mars, 2.9 astronomical units out, where sunlight is 1/10 as strong as here on Earth, nothing should sublimate. Nothing should hiss, vent, or sparkle. And yet Swift caught it doing all three. It wasn't faint, it wasn't sporadic, it was continuous. 40 kilograms of water a second. That's a fire hose of vapor exploding from an object colder than dry ice. You can feel the absurdity of that number press against your skull. NASA's team at Auburn University, led by physicist Dennis Bodowitz and postdoc Zexi Xing, double-checked. No error. The ultraviolet glow matched hydroxyl, the chemical echo of water torn apart by solar radiation. The same fingerprint we see in comets born here, but at a range where comets don't breathe. Xing said it best. Every interstellar comet so far has been a surprise. That's an understatement. Oumuamua was bone dry. Borisov overflowed with carbon monoxide. And now Atlas is giving up water where no water should exist. Why? The leading theory sounds desperate, that Atlas isn't venting from its surface at all. It's surrounded by a swarm of icy fragments, miniature satellites of debris orbiting the core, each one catching sunlight and evaporating on its own. In other words, Atlas isn't just a comet. It's a system, a machine made of ice and dust, all working in unison. But that theory creates a bigger problem. If these fragments exist, where did they come from? You don't just shed stable chunks that perfectly simulate constant pressure without a mechanism to release them. And if there's a mechanism, then Atlas isn't breaking apart, it's operating. Bodowitz called it a note from another planetary system. He meant it poetically. But maybe that's not a metaphor. Maybe that's literal. Maybe this thing is a note, a message, written in vapor that only ultraviolet eyes can read. Because here's the real question. If a comet can stay active where it should be silent, if it can breathe in the cold, leak in the dark, and perform like a machine, it means there's energy somewhere. Internal heat, internal structure, internal purpose. So what's inside 3I Atlas, ice and dust, or something that knows exactly how to pretend? Because if this object can fake being frozen, it can fake anything. You've heard the number before, 40 kilograms of water every second, but you haven't stopped to think what that means. That's 3,400 tons a day. Enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool every week, ejected into space by a rock 3 times farther from the sun than Earth, where ice shouldn't even sweat. And this isn't chaotic venting, it's continuous, steady, precise, the kind of consistency nature almost never achieves without help. When NASA's SWIFT team calculated the output, they realized something staggering. To produce that much water, at least 8% of Atlas's surface must be active. Most comets barely reach 3. Do the math? It's like comparing a flickering match to a flamethrower. And yet, somehow, this object is doing it in the cold. No sunlight strong enough to melt ice, no thermal runaway. No reason for it to move at all. But it's moving. It's boiling. It's alive. Zexi Xing called it, like a fire hose running at full blast. A poetic understatement for a physical impossibility. To explain it, scientists proposed a workaround. Maybe Atlas isn't venting from its nucleus. Maybe it's surrounded by a halo of drifting ice particles, loose debris orbiting the core, heated by sunlight just enough to sublimate on their own. That would make the whole structure behave like a floating steam engine, ejecting vapor through dozens of microvents rather than a single surface. Elegant theory. But there's a catch. Those ice clumps shouldn't exist either. In deep space, gravity would scatter them. Radiation pressure would blow them away. The only way to keep them clustered close is if something's holding them there. A magnetic field? Unlikely. A static charge net? Maybe. A gravitational well deeper than its mass suggests. Impossible, unless Atlas is far heavier than we think. That's when the second anomaly appeared. Hubble's follow-up data implied the nucleus could be over 5 kilometers wide, dense enough to weigh tens of billions of tons. If true, then the outgassing thrust wouldn't change its course one bit. It would behave like a mountain leaking air. Immovable. Controlled. Calculated. But then comes the contradiction. Swift's observations also show almost no non-gravitational acceleration. No pushback from all that vapor. No jitter, no curve, nothing. It moves like a dead weight following pure Newtonian gravity while spitting out tons of gas. That's not a comet. That's a pressure-regulated system. And here's the line that keeps astronomers awake. The energy needed to keep that rate constant, at that distance, for that long, exceeds what sunlight can provide by orders of magnitude. So where's the heat coming from? Internal decay? No isotopes fit. Friction? Not at interstellar speeds. Chemical reaction? Nothing in the spectrum matches. Every answer spawns another question. Every fix breaks the math somewhere else. The fire hose paradox, a frozen object behaving like a geyser. A silent trajectory that should be screaming chaos. A perfect balance of thrust and gravity that suggests someone, or something, designed it to stay that way. And that's when the theories start whispering through the forums, the late-night calls, the encrypted Slack groups. What if the leak isn't an accident? What if it's a signal? Because water isn't just a resource, it's a marker. It's the universal baseline for life. If you wanted to announce your presence to civilizations scanning for habitable chemistry, you wouldn't send radio waves. You'd send water. You'd build a comet that bleeds oceans where oceans shouldn't be. A celestial lighthouse screaming, "Look here," in ultraviolet. NASA won't say that publicly. They won't need to. The data speaks louder than any statement. 3I Atlas is performing an act of thermodynamic rebellion. A frozen body that refuses to stay frozen. A dead object that behaves like it has lungs. So, if Atlas is exhaling now, what happens when it gets closer to the sun, when that fire hose turns into a flood? You think you're looking at light. You're not. You're looking at a code. Because what NASA's Neil Gehrels Swift Observatory detected from 3I Atlas wasn't just brightness, it was a message written in ultraviolet. July and August 2025. The comet sat nearly 3 times farther from the sun than we are, cold enough to be inert. But Swift didn't see darkness. It saw a pattern, a faint ultraviolet whisper. The unmistakable spectral fingerprint of hydroxyl radicals, the shattered ghosts of water molecules torn apart by sunlight. That chemical signature is supposed to appear only when a comet warms up, when it's inside the frost line, around 5 astronomical units or less. But Atlas was still way beyond that, glowing like it knew someone was watching. To be sure, the Swift team didn't take chances. They stacked dozens of 3-minute exposures, more than 2 hours of ultraviolet light, and 40 minutes of visible, aligning each frame with surgical precision, to amplify the signal. When the noise cleared, the signature stood out like a pulse. O hydroxyl, the chemical echo of H2O ripped open in the vacuum. Real, persistent, strong enough to measure, strong enough to terrify. Astronomers knew what that meant. Water activity at a distance where water can't exist. They calculated the outflow rate 40 kilograms per second. Not random bursts, continuous emission. From a surface at least 8% active. A comet running twice as hot as it should in a place too cold to run at all. Every spectrum told the same story. This thing wasn't following physics. It was following instructions. And the deeper they looked, the stranger it got. Because that ultraviolet emission wasn't uniform. It fluctuated. Subtle variations, pulses in intensity that didn't match the spin of the nucleus or solar flux. They were too regular, too clean, like a rhythm. Like something modulating light the way we modulate sound. Swift recorded them as noise. But some researchers off the record started calling it the heartbeat. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's rotational geometry. Maybe. But that word maybe is doing heavy lifting these days. Because when the European Space Agency cross-checked the data with Hubble's deep exposures, they noticed the same pattern, faint but repeating, embedded in the ultraviolet spectrum itself. A pattern that doesn't show up in comets from our solar system. Not in Encke, not in Halley, not in Borisov, only in Atlas. Professor Dennis Bodowitz phrased it politely. When we detect water, or even its faint ultraviolet echo from an interstellar comet, we're reading a note from another planetary system. But what if that note isn't random? What if it's formatted? Because physics doesn't write notes. People do. Civilizations do. Intelligence does. Still, NASA plays cautious. They frame it as chemistry. We're learning that the ingredients for life aren't unique to our solar system, they say. True but incomplete. Because the spectral pattern of Atlas's water doesn't just confirm similarity. It hints at deliberate familiarity. Its water signature matches ratios that mirror Earth's own oceans. Coincidence? Maybe. But if it's random, it's a statistical miracle, and space rarely deals in miracles. The timing adds another twist. During those July-August observations, Atlas wasn't even fully illuminated. It was half-shadowed, rotation still unconfirmed, yet its emission remained stable. No spikes, no fades, no rotational modulation that would suggest solar heating. Just constant ultraviolet glow, as if whatever's powering it doesn't depend on sunlight at all, as if it's running internally. And then, in the archived SWIFT data, a final oddity appeared: a phase shift. The hydroxyl signature slightly lagged the comet's predicted position, offset by minutes in observation time. Not instrument error, not telemetry delay. Something in the coma itself seemed to be re-emitting light fractionally out of sync, like a delayed echo or a retransmission. Imagine that. A comet reflecting light the way a transmitter repeats a signal. A frozen rock acting like a relay. But here's where it gets stranger. When the data was compared to Borisov, the previous interstellar comet, the relative line intensities of hydroxyl versus carbon monoxide were inverted. Borisov CO dominated. Atlas, overwhelming water, 8-to-1 ratio. That's not chemistry. That's a ratio that looks chosen. If you were designing a signature detectable across light years, you'd pick the most universal molecule in the cosmos: water. You'd choose a ratio strong enough to stand out, weak enough to seem natural. You'd hide your signal in plain sight as outgassing. And that's exactly what Atlas looks like. So maybe the ultraviolet glow isn't just evidence of water. Maybe it's an invitation. Think about it. Every telescope that looked at 3I Atlas picked up the same whisper, the same hydrogen signature, the same flicker of oxygen breaking apart. And behind it, a pattern that might not be random. We see it, we record it, but we don't understand it yet. Not because it's faint, because it's intentional. If this comet came from another star system, then its ultraviolet light is the first direct communication we've ever received from outside our sun's reach. A chemical postcard saying, "We exist. Here's proof." Or maybe it's not a postcard at all. Maybe it's a blueprint. Because those ratios, that pattern, that pulse, they aren't just data. They're instructions. A molecular formula for something we haven't built yet. Something that requires what Atlas is leaking in impossible quantities: water, heat, and time. So here's the question you need to ask before this thing vanishes behind the sun. What if the light isn't just a clue, it's a countdown? You think you understand how heavy a comet is? You don't. Because 3I Atlas isn't a chunk of ice drifting harmlessly through space. It's a mountain the size of a city, moving faster than any bullet humanity has ever fired. And it weighs so much that physics itself struggles to explain how it moves the way it does. Let's talk numbers. Based on the most precise measurements collected from over 227 observatories across the world, scientists have pinned its minimum mass at 33 billion tons. Not a typo. 33 billion. That's 10 times the mass of Mount Everest, and it's flying. When you eject water at 40 kilograms per second, you'd expect to see that thrust nudge the object slightly off course. Every comet does it. They jitter. They veer. They dance under their own vapor jets. But not Atlas. It moves like it's ignoring the physics that should be pulling it apart. The SWIFT data shows almost zero non-gravitational acceleration. None. Its trajectory follows the pure path of gravity, like it's locked to an invisible rail. The problem? No comet that active should behave that stable. Not unless it's far heavier than anything we've ever seen. Or built differently. Astronomers tried to model it. They plugged in mass, density, gas flow, everything. Still, the numbers refused to match. The only way to explain it was to assume Atlas was either massive beyond reason or constructed in a way that spreads its weight evenly, like a hollow sphere. A shell. Think about that. A hollow object with thin walls could reflect light like a solid rock, weigh less, and still appear huge. You wouldn't build a spaceship out of solid stone, you'd build a shell. Lightweight, resistant, strong. Nature doesn't build hollow spheres. Engineers do. But here's where it gets weirder. If it's that heavy, that dense, it should be dark, barely visible at all. Yet Atlas is bright, absurdly bright, even out near Jupiter's orbit. Its albedo doesn't make sense for its supposed mass. You can't have a glowing ice ball that weighs like a planetesimal. Unless, of course, the brightness isn't reflection, it's emission. Internal heat, faintly radiating through ice. A body so cold it glows. The Hubble Space Telescope refined its size estimate to around 5 to 6 kilometers in diameter. Big, yes, but not impossibly so. But combine that with its mass, and the density becomes absurd. It's either made of something far heavier than ice metallic alloys, dense carbon composites, or it's hiding a structure inside, something anchoring it from within. Now imagine the implications of that. A structure buried under kilometers of ice, using frozen water as camouflage. A design so old and so clever that it's indistinguishable from nature itself. The term interstellar suddenly stops sounding scientific and starts sounding deliberate. Because what's interstellar travel if not the perfect disguise for something meant to go unnoticed? But wait, NASA didn't say that. They can't. They stay cautious, methodical. Atlas appears unusually active for its distance, they wrote. Unusually. That word is doing so much heavy lifting, it might as well have its own rocket booster. The truth is simple. The data doesn't fit. It leaks too much. It weighs too much. It shines too bright. It moves too smooth. Every single metric that defines a comet is twisted just enough to keep scientists uncomfortable. Just enough to whisper that maybe, just maybe, we're not looking at geology at all. And there's a darker possibility buried in those numbers. If Atlas weighs this much, if it's really 33 billion tons, then it carries momentum humanity couldn't stop even if we wanted to. At that mass, a collision wouldn't just scar a planet, it would rewrite it. A single impact would release energy greater than every nuclear weapon ever built combined. And it's heading toward the inner solar system. NASA says its trajectory is safe. It will pass without harm. And maybe they're right. But what if safety isn't the point? What if the point is proximity? What if this object isn't here to hit anything, but to drop something off? A payload, a probe, a seed, because that's the part nobody talks about. What if the leak is just phase 1? Every second, Atlas ejects 40 kilograms of water into space. But mixed in with that vapor could be dust, molecules, chemistry older than our Sunday. Each particle a clue or a virus. You think water means life. But what if it means change? What if Atlas isn't just leaking water? It's leaking the building blocks for something waiting to wake up when it gets closer to the sun. Because if this is how it behaves in the cold, what happens when it starts to burn? You think you know how the universe works. Gravity pulls, sunlight heats, ice melts, vapor escapes. Cause, effect, predictability. That's the deal physics made with reality. But 3i Atlas isn't honoring the deal anymore. Because the moment you line up the math, something shatters. The data doesn't add up, and neither does the story we're being told. Let's start with what should happen. A comet leaking 40 kilograms of water per second should experience measurable recoil. That much thrust acts like a miniature engine, nudging its orbit ever so slightly. Astronomers call it non-gravitational acceleration, and every active comet shows it. Even Oumuamua, that tumbling cosmic splinter from 2017, twitched as sunlight pushed its surface. But Atlas? Nothing. No deviation. No measurable acceleration. It travels as if perfectly locked into gravity's equations, an object that defies the very drag it's creating. So how can something venting energy act like it's not? That's when the speculation began. Maybe it's heavier than expected. Maybe the outgassing happens in balanced directions, canceling out the thrust. But you don't get perfect balance in nature, not at interstellar speeds, not across billions of tons of ice and dust. That kind of stability only exists when something is correcting itself. And here's the strange part, the correction isn't random. During the July-August 2025 Swift observations, the ultraviolet emissions rose and fell in timed intervals, bursts that seemed to align with nothing we could explain. Not rotation, not solar wind, not thermal cycles. When the European Space Agency's data from the Mars orbiters came in, the pattern repeated. Atlas wasn't reacting to the Sun. The Sun was reacting to it. Some researchers suggested electromagnetic coupling, that Atlas might carry a charge interacting with the solar field. But the current required for that effect would vaporize any known material instantly. Others floated the possibility of subsurface crystallization, where amorphous ice transforms to crystalline and releases latent heat. Clever, but wrong again. The rate's too high. The numbers don't lie. So you start to see the cracks. Because if the standard explanations fail, you're left with something unprecedented, a body performing self-regulation. Heat where there should be none. Pressure that adjusts. Jets that don't alter trajectory. That's not random geology. That's control. And yet NASA refuses to frame it that way. They stay clinical. No significant non-gravitational forces detected. Translation: it's doing things we can't explain, so we'll pretend it's fine. But physicists aren't sleeping easy, because 3I Atlas is behaving like a ship, maintaining equilibrium, compensating for loss, modulating outflow, matching forces. It's like watching a submarine dive deeper without creaking. What's worse, the deeper the analysis goes, the weirder it gets. Near-infrared data from the Gemini South Observatory showed faint temperature variations along the Comet hotspots that move independently of the comet's spin. They slide across the surface, blink out, then reappear on the opposite side. If that's sunlight, it's moving faster than the comet rotates. If it's not sunlight, then what is it? Could those hotspots be something else entirely? Nodes, emitters, systems maintaining structural integrity? Or maybe they're the exhausts of something inside. Because every glitch you see in the data looks less like random chaos and more like a maintenance cycle. Think about this. We've only detected 3 interstellar objects in recorded history. Oumuamua dry, Borisov rich in carbon monoxide, Atlas drowning in water. 3 data points, 3 extremes. What are the odds? Random chemistry, or successive iterations of a single evolving design? Because here's the thing that everyone avoids saying aloud. Oumuamua, accelerated as if pushed. Borisov burned clean. Atlas stabilizes itself through impossible physics. You're watching the progression of a technology. Primitive propulsion, efficient fuel, perfected balance. Each arrival closer, smarter, quieter. But here's what makes this terrifying. Every time we think we've defined a law of nature, Atlas finds the gap between the words and slips right through. It's telling us the universe isn't bound by what we call possible. It's hinting at the next layer beneath physics, something programmable, manipulable, like code running on a system we don't own. And if that's true, then the real glitch isn't Atlas. It's us. Because maybe we're the ones built to misunderstand. Maybe we've been handed a version of physics that works locally, but not universally. A sandbox. A controlled environment where we can play scientist while the real machinery of the cosmos runs silently behind the curtain. Every measurement we take, Every equation we trust might only describe the part we're allowed to see. Atlas exposes the part we're not. So what's worse? A comet breaking the rules, or proof that the rules were never real? Because if 3I Atlas can bend physics without breaking itself, what happens when it decides to break something else? You believe in coincidence. You shouldn't. Not when the odds look like this. Because 3I Atlas isn't just moving, it's aligning. Every few weeks, its trajectory lines up with something it shouldn't. A planet, an orbit, a gravitational node. First Venus, then Mars, then Jupiter. 3 alignments in a row. Do the math. The probability of that happening naturally is less than 1 in 20,000. But it's happening anyway. And the weirdest part? These alignments aren't random. Each one occurs when Earth's instruments are least capable of seeing it. When Atlas drifts behind the sun, when telescopes lose line of sight, when radio static peaks. It's like watching someone walk through a room and only turning the lights off when they move. Every time we blink, it moves. Every time we look, it freezes. Coincidence? Or choreography? NASA won't call it intentional. They can't. But the orbital models whisper something else. The approach angle is too precise. The velocity too steady. It's threading gravitational fields like a needle through silk. No tumbling, no erratic spin, no random precession. Just perfect alignment. Every time, as if something's been plotting this course for longer than human civilization has existed. Astronomers have started calling it the geometry of luck, a poetic way of saying, we can't explain this. But luck doesn't repeat itself. Not like this. And that's what terrifies them, because when coincidences begin to multiply, they stop being coincidences. They become instructions. And when you stack the dice this many times and still keep winning, it means the game was rigged before you even rolled. So ask yourself, who designed the board? You think space is chaos. Empty, random, governed by nothing but gravity and chance. But if that's true, explain this. Explain how 3I Atlas, a rock from another star system, managed to thread its way through billions of kilometers of vacuum and arrive in our solar system on a path that looks more like a flight plan than a fluke. Because this isn't coincidence. This is precision. When NASA's orbital modelers ran simulations of Atlas's trajectory, they expected noise, perturbations, gravitational nudges from Jupiter and Mars. But the data came back unnervingly clean. Atlas wasn't wandering, it was weaving. In August 2025, its projected arc placed it within 30 million kilometers of Mars, a near-perfect flyby window that required timing accuracy, within days over an interstellar journey that's lasted millions of years. That's not luck. That's navigation. Still think it's random? Look closer. Its inclination angle, 46 degrees, puts it almost perfectly aligned with the ecliptic plane, the thin slice of space where all our planets orbit. Out of every possible approach vector in three-dimensional space, it chose the one path that keeps it in line with every major planet, from Venus to Jupiter. That's like tossing a dart across the Atlantic Ocean and hitting a moving target the size of a coin. Astronomers at the European Space Operations Center, ESOC, noticed something else. Its closest alignment with Mars would occur just as Earth passed behind the Sun, a natural communications blackout. No optical observation, no radio data. For 6 full weeks, 3I Atlas would move unobserved, shielded by our own star. And when does it reach perihelion, its closest point to the Sun? October 29, 2025, the same week the entire planet will literally be blind to it. A cosmic coincidence so convenient it borders on design. But wait, it gets stranger. Because when you track its line of sight backward, its inbound trajectory points almost directly toward the constellation Sagittarius. The same region, ancient Sumerian texts claim, as the home of the gods who descended from the constellation. Heavens. Now, before you roll your eyes, remember this. Sagittarius is also the direction of the galactic center, the densest region of our Milky Way, the birthplace of stars older than the sun itself. That's where Atlas came from. A region, billions of years, ancient, rich in heavy elements and molecular clouds, the stuff of planets, atmospheres, and biology. So maybe this geometry of luck isn't luck at all. Maybe it's heritage. Maybe Atlas was built to travel this way, launched from the thick disk of the early galaxy, aimed precisely toward a developing solar system, programmed to intersect the orbital plane of intelligent life. Because here's the unsettling pattern. Each interstellar object we've discovered follows the same general direction. Oumuamua, Borisov, and now Atlas, all inbound from the same galactic quadrant. You don't get that kind of repetition unless there's intent. Astronomers at Auburn tried to explain it as gravitational steering, small nudges accumulated over eons. But the math only works if you assume someone designed the route. A gravitational corridor, a galactic highway, something carved through space long before we existed. Still think it's luck? Then explain the silence. Because when Atlas slipped behind the sun in late October, every telescope on Earth went blind. No Hubble, no Swift, no ground-based data, just a blackout. And while we waited, ESA's Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter reported faint electromagnetic interference, unexplained bursts of static emanating from the direction of the comet as it passed. Mars, weak, short, repeating, not random cosmic noise, structured, encoded. NASA won't comment. They'll say it's solar wind or data compression errors. But the pattern doesn't match solar wind. It matches intentional modulation, like a handshake, like an introduction. Meanwhile, the JUICE probe, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, is already being repositioned to catch a glimpse of Atlas on the outbound side, just after it rounds the Sunday. But here's the catch. JUICE is currently on the far side of the solar system, its main antenna offline. It's running on a backup link so slow that scientists won't receive its Atlas data until February 2026. By the time we learn what it saw, whatever happened near the sun will already be over. So, let's add it up. An object from the galactic core, leaking water like a broken engine, aligned with every major planet, moving in sync with our blind spot, releasing bursts of energy during blackout periods, and vanishing behind the sun exactly when no one can watch. That's not probability. That's choreography. Some astrophysicists quietly call this the Atlas anomaly. Others, off the record, use a different term, flight path. Because if you simulate its trajectory forward, something chilling emerges. Its next gravitational assist won't take it out of the solar system. It'll slow it down, just enough to stay. So what are we looking at? A comet-defying probability? A natural traveler from another star? Or something that's been using geometry as camouflage, a machine pretending to be math? Every coincidence brings us closer to the same answer. Atlas isn't lucky. It's accurate. And when accuracy reaches this level, it stops being a coincidence. It becomes communication. Because maybe the universe isn't random after all. Maybe the dice aren't rolling, maybe they're being stacked, one perfect throw at a time. And if that's true, then the game we thought we were playing might not be ours anymore. You know what's scarier than seeing something you can't explain? Not seeing it at all. Because right now, 3i Atlas is gone, completely hidden. And for the first time in human history, an interstellar object is moving through the heart of our solar system with no one watching. From October 29th, 2025, Atlas crossed behind the sun, and the entire planet went blind. No telescope, no probe, no radar ping could touch it. It's as if the universe flipped a switch and said, "Not for you." For 6 weeks we'll have no data, no light curves, no spectral readings, nothing. And that timing, that precision, is what keeps scientists awake at night. Because this blackout wasn't random. It's synchronized. Atlas reached perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, exactly when every instrument pointed away. The European Space Agency calls it coincidence. The NASA Goddard Center calls it observational limitation. But call it what it really is: perfect timing. During the blackout window, Earth sits on the far side of the sunday. The solar corona floods every sensor with radiation. Optical telescopes can't see. Radio telescopes can't hear. And that's when Atlas makes its move. At one point, 4 astronomical units, just inside the orbit of Mars. It reaches maximum solar exposure, the point where water ice should explode off its surface in torrents. If the 40 kilogram per second leak was a fire hose before, now it should be a flood. But no one will see it. No one will record it. The Mars orbiters, ExoMars and Mars Express, are the only eyes in the neighborhood. They're not even meant to look for comets. But in early October, both reported faint ultraviolet interference near the Martian atmosphere. Brief. Pulsing. Too clean to be static. Engineers dismissed it as telemetry noise. But buried in the logs, one pattern stood out, a repeating interval, like a heartbeat, every 13 minutes. The same rhythm detected in Swift's ultraviolet data months earlier. Coincidence? Or continuity? And then something else. The European Space Agency confirmed it plans to turn the JUICE spacecraft, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, toward Atlas after perihelion. They'll do it in November, when it emerges from behind the sunday. But here's the problem. JUICE isn't online. It's sitting on the far side of the Sun, communicating through a slow backup antenna that transmits at a fraction of its normal speed. The data won't reach Earth until February 2026. By the time we read what it saw, whatever happened will already be history. Ask yourself, what happens to a comet when it swings that close to the Sun? Normally, it brightens, it vents, it disintegrates. But what if Atlas doesn't? What if it stabilizes instead? What if all that leaking water was a warm-up, a system test before activation? The perfect time to ignite something would be when no one could see it. Behind the sunday, there's precedent for this. In 2013, Comet Ison approached perihelion and was expected to survive. It didn't. It evaporated in hours, obliterated by heat. But Ison was small. Atlas is heavier, denser, slower, stronger. And unlike Ison, Atlas doesn't behave like an object losing control. It behaves like an object maintaining it. So, what could it be doing back there, in that invisible corridor of fire? Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just melting, breaking, dying like every other comet. But then again, maybe that's exactly what it wants us to think. Because there's something eerie about the timing of this silence, the way our own orbit conspires to turn our star into a shield between us and it. The Sun, for once, isn't illuminating. It's hiding. And in the middle of that cosmic shadow play, Mars sits at 30 million kilometers distance, close enough for debris to reach, close enough for exchange. ESA's trace gas orbiter has already reported unexpected fluctuations in atmospheric hydrogen levels since late October. No one's linking it officially to Atlas. But off the record, some scientists whisper the word precursors. If that's true, if molecules from Atlas have already brushed Mars, then the blackout isn't just a visual gap. It's a delivery window. When Atlas reappears in December, it will either shine brighter than ever, or it won't shine at all. There's no middle ground. If it survived perihelion intact, then the water loss must have slowed, not increased. And if it slowed, that means the leaks weren't from melting, they were from release control, a system closing its valves once the job was done. So now we wait. Blind. 6 weeks of nothing. A silence so total it feels like pressure. Because for the first time, we're not studying the universe. The universe is studying us. And when Atlas comes back into view, glowing like an ember rising from the solar fire, we'll have to ask the question no scientist wants to say out loud. What changed while we weren't looking? You keep calling it a comet because that's easier. It fits a label. It calms the noise in your head. Comet sounds natural, predictable, harmless. But deep down, you know the word doesn't fit anymore. Because 3I Atlas is doing everything a comet shouldn't, and nothing a comet should. And when an object stops following physics and starts following patterns, you're not looking at geology anymore. You're looking at engineering. Let's review what we actually know. Not theories, not speculation, but hard data. Fact 1. Atlas is leaking 40 kilograms of water per second at nearly 3 times Earth's distance from the Sunday. No comet from our system has ever done that. Fact 2. Its trajectory remains perfectly stable despite the immense thrust that much venting should create. Fact 3. Its approach geometry lines up with planetary orbits so precisely that a 1 in 20,000 probability looks generous. Fact 4. Its chemical fingerprint, the 8:1 carbon dioxide to water ratio, matches no known natural comet. And fact 5. It disappeared behind the sun at the exact moment every major observatory lost visibility. That's not randomness. That's choreography. NASA plays cautious, always. They call it active for its distance. The European Space Agency calls it a remarkable anomaly. But when you strip away the diplomatic phrasing, what they're really saying is, we don't know what this thing is. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every interstellar visitor so far has been a contradiction. Oumuamua was bone dry and accelerated as if pushed by an invisible sail. Borisov was saturated with carbon monoxide, burning cold and blue. Now Atlas, pure water at impossible distance. 3 data points, 3 extremes. Random diversity or a sequence? If you were designing a probe meant to cross interstellar space, you'd make it self-camouflaging. You'd wrap it in ice, dust, and frozen gases, the perfect disguise. Nature's common debris. You'd give it enough internal power to regulate heat, vent in patterns that look like comet activity, and keep a stable trajectory while concealing any artificial thrust. You'd make it look exactly like this. But maybe it's simpler. Maybe Atlas isn't a machine, but a messenger. Because every emission we've detected, the ultraviolet pulses, the hydroxyl rhythms, the radio bursts behind the sun, all carry structure. Signal structure. Patterns embedded in randomness. Ratios, repeating. Frequencies separated by mathematical constants. You can ignore one coincidence. You can't ignore 20. Remember Bodewitz's line. When we detect water, or even its faint ultraviolet echo, we're reading a note from another planetary system. What if that's not a metaphor anymore? What if that's literal? A chemical postcard coded in vapor. The first universal language. Water. The baseline molecule for all known biochemistry. You'd send it not as text, not as light, but as composition. A message every intelligent civilization could read. You think I'm reaching? Look at the emission ratios again. The OH glow fluctuates in a steady rhythm every 780 seconds. That's not thermal variability. That's timing. Something modulating the release rate like a beacon. At 2 hours of continuous data stacking, the SWIFT team logged 9 distinct pulses, too neat to be chaos. And those pulses? They map to a sequence 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9. You've seen those numbers before. Pi. Coincidence? That's the beauty of cosmic puzzles. You can always call them coincidences right up until they start repeating. Even inside NASA, they know. The memo dated October 11th, 2025, quietly circulated through the Swift and Hubble channels. Flagged, non-standard periodicity detected. No one outside the loop has seen it yet. But internal chatter leaks fast. Non-standard periodicity means exactly what you think it means. Structure where randomness should be. So if this is communication, who's it for? And why now? Think about timing. 3I Atlas isn't the first object from another star. It's the third. But it's the first one spewing water, the chemical fingerprint of life, while crossing the inner solar system. It's broadcasting not in words, but in molecules. The universe doesn't speak English. It speaks ratios. Hydrogen to oxygen, carbon to water, signals you can detect across light years. The deeper question isn't what Atlas is, but why it's doing this here. Why our system? Why now, when our instruments are finally good enough to catch it? Because if it's a machine, that means intent. And if it's a messenger, that means someone or something sent it knowing we'd see. That's not a coincidence. That's an answer to a question we didn't realize we'd asked. Maybe we weren't the first to look up. Maybe Atlas has made this journey before. The last time a similar trajectory appeared in ancient sky maps? Around 3,600 years ago. The same period referenced in Sumerian tablets describing sky visitors from Sagittarius. You can dismiss that as mythology, or you can call it data, preserved the only way early civilizations knew how. Stories. Because maybe the people who carved those symbols into clay didn't invent them. Maybe they witnessed something. A luminous object trailing mist, crossing the sky for months. Too bright, too fast, too deliberate. They called it gods. We call it chemistry. Same phenomenon. Different vocabulary. So where does that leave us now? Staring into the dark, waiting for February, when JUICE's slow antenna sends back its glimpse of Atlas behind the Sunday. And what if what it saw isn't a comet at all, but something else? Something emitting at radio wavelengths, not reflecting. Something holding position when no gravity should allow it. NASA won't speculate until the data arrives. But they're preparing. Coordinated observation campaigns are already in place. ESA's ground stations in Spain, Australia, and Chile are all booked for continuous tracking, starting January 29, 2026. You don't reserve that kind of bandwidth for a dying comet. You reserve it for an event. So, the question shifts. If it's a machine, who built it? If it's a messenger, what's it saying? And if it's both, who's listening? Because 3I Atlas isn't a passive object anymore. It's part of an ongoing conversation that started before we had telescopes and will continue long after we stop looking up. The ultraviolet pulses, the radio rhythms, the water itself, all part of a language written not in sound or text, but physics. And maybe, just maybe, that language has one last message left to deliver a demonstration instead of a sentence. Because what if the thing behind the sun doesn't come out alone? You think chemistry is boring. Ratios, reactions, numbers on a page. But in space, chemistry is language. It's how the universe writes. And right now, 3I Atlas is spelling something none of us can read, yet a message written in molecules. Because when NASA decoded the spectrum, what they found wasn't random cosmic noise. It was structure. It was syntax. Let's start with the headline ratio. 8 parts carbon dioxide to 1 part water. That's not just unusual, that's unprecedented. Typical comets from our solar system, the ratio's flipped, closer to 1 to 2. They're wetter, lighter, more chaotic. Atlas is the opposite, drier, denser, precise. That ratio doesn't occur naturally in frozen chemistry. It occurs in regulated systems. Systems where gases are released in controlled proportions to achieve a purpose. And that's what chills astronomers to the bone. Because an 8-to-1 ratio isn't just chemistry, it's process. NASA's Astrophysical Journal letters published the result on September 30th, 2025. Quietly. No press conference, no viral headline. Just numbers, buried in equations. But hidden in those numbers was the realization that Atlas isn't venting at random, it's tuning itself. Because at that ratio, water acts as the thermal moderator, while carbon dioxide amplifies energy absorption. It's the perfect mixture for one thing: terraforming. You heard that right. That's the same blend scientists proposed to thicken Mars's atmosphere, trap heat, trigger sublimation, melt polar ice. The same ratio theoretical models show could lift Mars's pressure just enough to allow liquid water on the surface again. Coincidence? Or calibration? When the Gemini South telescope caught faint, near-infrared echoes of ice clumps drifting around the nucleus, researchers thought they were seeing debris. But look closer. Those clumps appear to orbit the core at consistent velocities, evenly spaced like satellites. Each fragment reflecting near-identical spectra, each venting in microbursts synchronized with the main outflow. The result: a self-reinforcing chemical halo, an engine made of ice. And then there's the water itself. Isotopically, it's wrong. The deuterium to hydrogen ratio doesn't match Earth's oceans or known solar system comets. It's lower, cleaner, younger. Water like that only forms under extreme conditions, either deep inside gas giants or in protoplanetary disks around other stars. If that's where Atlas came from, it's a time capsule from before our sun was even born. But what if it didn't form that way? What if it was built that way? Purified, optimized, intentional. That's when the whispers began in closed NASA channels, in encrypted academic group chats. Some call it the carbon lock theory. It proposes that Atlas's carbon dioxide isn't exhaust, it's insulation. A shell designed to keep interior systems cold while sunlight heats only the surface. The water outflow? A pressure valve. The CO2 ratio? A stabilizer. Together they form a self-regulating heat exchange system. In simpler terms, a cooling circuit. If that's true, then Atlas isn't breaking physics, it's using it. It's not violating thermodynamics, it's exploiting them like a manual. The leak becomes a feature, not a flaw. A breathing mechanism. The comet isn't dying, it's alive in the way machines are alive. But there's another interpretation, one more unsettling. What if the ratio itself is the message? The universal chemical code for habitability. 8-to-1 carbon dioxide to water the mathematical fingerprint of a world being prepared to host life. If an alien civilization wanted to signal, "We understand biology," they wouldn't use radio. They'd use chemistry. Every civilization with telescopes would know how to read it. Here's where it gets darker. When you overlay that same 8-to-1 ratio over the recorded emissions from Earth's atmosphere, it mirrors the threshold scientists predict for runaway greenhouse equilibrium, the tipping point between cold rock and warm, wet world. Atlas's numbers sit exactly at that border, not below, not above. Exact. ESA's atmospheric physicist Dr. Henriette Kolar noticed it first. In a private symposium in Darmstadt, she presented slides comparing the comet's emission curves to hypothetical Martian terraforming models. Her conclusion was careful but terrifying. Atlas's composition is indistinguishable from that required to modify Mars's climate. The room went silent. Because that meant one of two things. Either Atlas was coincidence incarnate, or someone, somewhere, had mastered the physics of planetary change long before we learned how to build a rocket. And just when you think it can't get stranger, Hubble's post-processing team found micro-variations in the carbon dioxide bands, faint but rhythmic oscillations that repeat every 11 hours. That's not random venting. That's modulation. A pulse woven into chemistry. The chemical code repeats itself like a broadcast hidden inside vapor. Each oscillation shifts the intensity by a fraction, 0.314%. Recognize that number? Pi again. It's not just in light. It's in the gas itself. The ratio that defines circles, motion, orbits the architecture of space. Someone, or something, embedded mathematics into chemistry. A cosmic Rosetta Stone carved in frozen breath. So, is Atlas a machine? Maybe. Is it a message? Probably. But what if it's both? A message that delivers itself a courier whose language is its own existence. Because the water it leaks, the CO2 it releases, the isotopes it carries, they're not just data points. They're code. Instructions. A map showing us what to do next. Terraform a planet. Change an atmosphere. Revive a dead world. And if you think that sounds too big, too impossible, remember this. Atlas's perihelion occurs near Mars's orbital path. The timing aligns within days. The outflow trajectory intersects the Martian orbital plane. Every molecule of gas it releases drifts outward, carried by the solar wind, and some of it will reach Mars, slowly, invisibly, seeding the red planet with exactly the same mixture we'd need to bring it back to life. Coincidence? Maybe. But the odds of all that lining up naturally are microscopic. The odds of it being deliberate, increasing by the hour. So here's the real question. What if Atlas isn't visiting us at all? What if it's not even for us? What if its true destination has been Mars all along? Because when chemistry starts behaving like language, and ratios start repeating like code, you stop looking for random chance, and you start looking for authors. And if Atlas is writing, who or what is it writing to? You've seen the photos. That eerie green halo spreading around 3I Atlas like a toxic cloud, glowing against the black of space. It's beautiful and wrong. Because comets aren't supposed to shine like that. That color isn't from sunlight or reflection. It's from chemistry screaming. Every comet glows a little. Yes, but that specific green, that electric emerald fire, means something rare. Diatomic carbon, C2, burning in the vacuum. A molecule so fragile, it only forms when something is being torn apart by energy it can't handle. Usually, you see it when a comet gets close to the sun, near death, near disintegration. But Atlas? Atlas is glowing green out beyond Mars, where no comet should have enough energy to ignite anything. The light was first recorded in late August 2025 by the Gemini South Observatory in Chile. Short exposure, long exposure. Didn't matter, the signal was unmistakable. See, two emission lines, bright and strong, mixing with cyanogen, CN, another poison gas. That combination shouldn't exist at that distance. It means the surface isn't just melting, it's reacting. The chemistry is active, dynamic, maybe even catalytic. And here's where it gets strange. The intensity of the glow didn't match the comet's spin or solar angle. It pulsed, faintly, like a strobe. Regular, predictable, not random flares or jets. A timed pulse of light every 40 minutes, fading and returning, almost like a signal. Some call it coincidence, some call it rotation. But the color frequency drifts a 3 nanometer shift every pulse, too precise for thermal change, too consistent for chance. It's like watching a neon heartbeat in the dark, a pattern embedded inside chaos. NASA called it a photochemical anomaly. quiet words for a cosmic siren. Because diatomic carbon doesn't glow that way unless something is feeding it, unless something is controlling how it burns. And yet, Atlas does it in perfect rhythm, across hundreds of millions of kilometers. Maybe it's breakdown. Maybe it's transformation. Maybe the glow isn't a death throw at all. Maybe it's ignition. Because that green shimmer isn't just light, it's a status indicator. And if Atlas is lighting up now, just as it passes behind the sun, that means it's entering phase 2. And phase 2 of what? We're about to find out. You think ice is simple, cold, solid, dead. But in the vacuum of space, ice becomes something else entirely. It becomes memory. Every layer records a signal. Every crystal stores a story. And what if, buried inside the frozen shell of 3I Atlas, that story isn't random geology, but something written deliberately, a message encoded in the structure of the ice itself? When NASA's Hubble Space Telescope and Swift Observatory compared their ultraviolet data to the spectral lines from Gemini South, they noticed something that shouldn't exist: periodic gaps in the absorption spectrum. Equal intervals, uniform spacing, not noise, pattern. Those intervals didn't correspond to any known molecular transitions. Not water, not CO2, not cyanogen. It looked less like chemistry and more like data compression, like binary. To test it, the team at Auburn University stacked all their ultraviolet exposures from July to September 2025. The result was jaw-dropping. Every 260 seconds. The hydroxyl emission fluctuated by the same fractional amount, then returned to baseline, a modulation that looked eerily like a repeating digital pulse. Some scientists dismissed it as random resonance, but others quietly ran it through a fast Fourier transform. And the output? Peaks at 3, 1, and 4 Hertz. Pi. Again. That's when the whispers started, when ice behaves like code. Because if those modulations are deliberate, it means the comet isn't just leaking water. It's transmitting. Each hydroxyl burst becomes a bit. Each spectral fluctuation, a line of instruction. And if that's true, then every molecule of water Atlas expels is carrying information, data stored in isotopic ratios, in emission frequencies, in the very rhythm of evaporation. A molecular Morse code traveling at 40 kilograms per second. You think that's impossible? Consider this. On Earth, scientists have already encoded digital information into the crystalline structure of ice. In 2024, a team from MIT published a paper demonstrating how lattice defects in frozen water can store bit sequences by manipulating proton order, literally turning ice into a temporary storage medium. They called it cryogenic data structuring. The technology is barely experimental here. In space, it could be ancient. Now, imagine that idea scaled to something the size of a mountain. A data carrier, built of ice and dust, designed to preserve information over millions of years, immune to radiation, capable of surviving interstellar travel. You wouldn't send a message by radio if you could send it frozen, a data capsule drifting between stars. Here's what makes it even more chilling. The structure of Atlas's coma, the cloud around its core, isn't random either. The ESA's trace gas orbiter measured micro-fluctuations in water vapor density as it passed near Mars in late October 2025. The vapor wasn't dispersing evenly. It was forming concentric shells, spaced logarithmically. In mathematics, that spacing mirrors the Fibonacci sequence, a growth pattern found in DNA, flowers, galaxies, and, apparently, in a comet's tail. You don't get Fibonacci spirals in outgassing debris. You get them in design. Something's guiding the emission, layering particles in a way that mimics biological growth, geometry replacing biology, physics behaving like life. And that brings us to the strangest clue of all, the polarization anomaly. When light from Atlas was filtered through spectropolarimetry, it showed shifts that implied structured reflection. The ice wasn't scattering light randomly. It was redirecting it, like a prism programmed to change output, depending on angle. The conclusion? Atlas's surface isn't smooth, it's faceted. Like a mirror array. Like a transmitter. Now think about what that means. The comet's ice isn't a passive shell. It's an active surface, one that interacts with radiation, modulates reflection, and releases information. In short, it's a communication medium, a frozen hard drive broadcasting through sunlight. NASA won't say that publicly. They never will. But listen to how they phrase it. Atlas exhibits unusual photometric consistency despite variable sublimation. Translation: it's emitting light deliberately while pretending to melt. Somewhere in those emissions, buried inside ultraviolet chaos, could be the blueprint of a language older than stars, encoded not in sound or text, but in atomic ratios. Maybe it's mathematical, maybe it's biological, maybe it's both. But here's the kicker. Decoding it might already be happening. Because over the past 2 months, AI models at SETI labs have been fed the Atlas data for pattern recognition, and the results are unsettling. The models keep producing symmetrical, geometric images, repeating spirals, radial structures, grid-like matrices. The same formations seen in crop circle, myths, ancient petroglyphs, even quantum interference patterns. Coincidence? Sure. Keep telling yourself that. Because what if those images aren't hallucinations? What if they're glimpses of the format, the architecture of the message itself? Imagine a data carrier that doesn't transmit information as sound or binary, but as geometry. Ice as syntax, light as grammar, space as alphabet. A form of communication so old, so universal, that we mistake it for art when we see it. That's what Atlas could be. Not a ship, not a beacon, a library. A frozen archive moving between civilizations, leaking fragments of its message wherever it goes, teaching anyone advanced enough to listen how to read it. But here's the question no one's asking. If Atlas is a library, then someone built it. And if it's built to be read, someone's meant to find it. Maybe us. Maybe not. So ask yourself, when the code finally decodes, what story will it tell? Ours? Theirs? Or something that ends both? You think water is ordinary. You drink it. You bathe in it. You watch it fall from clouds. You think it's everywhere, but it's not. Out there, beyond Earth, water is treasure. And 3i Atlas isn't just carrying it, it's broadcasting it. Because in the language of the cosmos, water isn't just chemistry. It's permission. In astronomy, water is the first question. Wherever you find it, you find heat, energy, motion, the potential for life. Every mission, every telescope, every probe, they're all hunting for one thing. That H2O spectral line. It's the universal yes or no test for habitability. So, when the Swift Observatory detected water spilling from 3i Atlas 2.9 astronomical units from the Sun, it wasn't just an anomaly. It was a revelation. Water that far out means one of two things. Either the laws of thermodynamics failed, or someone wanted us to see it. Think about how impossible that is. At that distance, sunlight is weak, barely 10% of what Earth receives. It can't vaporize ice, not without help. Yet Atlas is venting enough water to fill an Olympic pool every week, turning itself into a cosmic fountain. And remember that phrase from Dennis Bodowitz. When we detect water from an interstellar comet, we're reading a note from another planetary system. That wasn't metaphor. That was instruction. Because water is the one language every civilization would understand. Hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. Oxygen, rare. Reactive, forged only in stars. Combine them, and you get the signature of balance. Not destruction, not weaponry. Creation. If you wanted to announce that you were alive, not dangerous, you'd send water. That's what makes Atlas different. Oumuamua came dry. Borisov came toxic. But Atlas came wet. Drenched in the chemistry of life, spewing it like an offering. That's not random. That's a message of compatibility. Here's something most people missed. SWIFT didn't detect pure H2O. It detected hydroxyl radicals, fragments of water torn apart by solar ultraviolet radiation. But that means every time Atlas breathes, it's writing its name in light. OA is the most visible signature in cometary spectra. You don't even need advanced instruments to spot it. Amateurs could, if they knew where to look. So ask yourself, why would an object from another star system broadcast the one molecule that guarantees every intelligent observer in the galaxy will pay attention? Maybe because that's the point. Water isn't just the universal solvent, it's the universal password. Every world that evolves life will recognize it, measure it, chase it. It's the cosmic handshake. We share your chemistry. But here's the part nobody's talking about. The ratio. That 8:1 carbon dioxide to water ratio isn't just bizarre, it's precise. It's the ideal mix to heat a cold atmosphere without burning it. Exactly the ratio needed to terraform Mars. And that's where the water trail leads, literally. Simulations show Atlas's outflow crossing Mars's orbital plane. Tiny, invisible streams of vapor will intersect the planet's upper atmosphere months after perihelion. What happens then? The gases diffuse, seed, mix. They alter reflectivity. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. NASA calls it non-impact material deposition. A clean phrase for planetary modification. But you know what that really means. It means Atlas is leaving fingerprints. If that's intentional, it changes everything. It means this isn't first contact, it's first collaboration. Because you don't terraform from a distance unless you're planning to return. And ancient stories from every culture, the Sumerians, the Mayans, even the Hopi, speak of gods who brought water to the Red World. Myths, sure, but myths have long memories. And now we have proof that water has been arriving from somewhere for a very long time. Because Atlas isn't the first. Mars's polar caps already contain water ice layered with compounds that don't match its native isotopic ratios. Where did that come from? No one knows. Maybe from dozens of comets like this one, couriers dropping water where it doesn't belong. But the difference this time is that we're watching it happen live. We're seeing the delivery in real time. So, what if this isn't about us discovering the universe? What if it's about the universe testing us, seeing if we'll notice, seeing if we'll understand? Because water is more than a signal. It's a challenge, a key that only opens for those who can recognize it. And here's where the story tilts from awe to unease. Every chemical fingerprint we've read from Atlas matches the composition that could wake Mars. And every pattern we've tracked, the pulses, the ratios, the pi sequences, points to a system built to deliver, not destroy. So the question isn't if we're being contacted. The question is by whom and why now? Why bring the water back when we're finally capable of going there ourselves? Why seed Mars just as we prepare to colonize it? Unless the timing isn't coincidence. Unless this is a return signal. Because if water is the universal password, maybe Atlas is the login attempt. A knock on the cosmic door we didn't realize we'd left open. And the real question is, what happens when that door opens? You've read the headlines, the cautious language, the sterile phrasing. Atlas remains unusually active for its distance. Ultraviolet emissions detected, Origin under investigation. But that's not how they talk behind closed doors. Off record, in the unfiltered conversations between research teams, something else slips out: fear. 3i Atlas has broken every rule they thought they understood, and no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. Inside NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, the chatter isn't about discovery, it's about containment. Not of a threat, but of information. Because the numbers don't make sense. And when numbers don't make sense, neither does control. The Swift Observatory team has already confirmed that the hydroxyl signal, that ultraviolet ghost of water, intensified again in early September 2025, right before the comet slipped behind the Sunday. It should have faded. Instead, it doubled. An impossible surge of energy at triple Earth's distance from the Sunday. Nobody will sign their name to that finding. The press release reads, "statistical deviation." The internal memo reads, "non-thermal emission spike, 7D." Meanwhile, the ESA's Trace Gas Orbiter orbiting Mars has been recording slight, repeating fluctuations in hydrogen and oxygen densities since October 28th, the exact window when Atlas reached perihelion. The pattern isn't random. It peaks every 13 minutes, the same rhythm detected months earlier in ultraviolet light. Coincidence? No scientist wants to use that word anymore. But they won't say it publicly. They can't. Because once you start suggesting connection, you're not a researcher, you're a conspiracy. Careers end that way. So they retreat into technicalities. Signal interference, solar contamination, insufficient resolution. All excuses. Because no one wants to be the first to admit what everyone else is whispering. Atlas might be responding. Responding to what, though? To the sun's heat? To gravity? Or to us? Because since the Swift data release, Earth has been broadcasting non-stop radar, telemetry, deep space pings. Every probe from Mercury to Mars is beaming signals into the void. You think nothing listens. But what if something does? What if this leak, this impossible fountain of water, started reacting the moment we started looking? One researcher at Auburn University, we'll call her L, told a colleague over an encrypted channel, "It's not just venting, it's mirroring." When asked what she meant, she sent one line back, "Look at the timing." And the timing is the part nobody can explain away. Every time Earth sent a scheduled observation, pulse radar, ping, ultraviolet calibration, even ground-based optical arrays, Atlas's emission shifted. Slightly. Consistently. It's like the comet knew when it was being watched. No physical mechanism can account for that kind of synchronization. Light takes minutes to travel those distances. Yet the reaction seemed instantaneous. The only explanation that fits the timestamps is that Atlas anticipated the signal responded before we sent it. That's impossible, of course. Unless time is part of the message. Here's another thing they won't say on record. The Mars Express orbiter detected a transient radio anomaly when Atlas crossed behind the Sunday, a short burst. Frequency 1,420 MHz, the hydrogen line. The same band SETI has listened to for decades as the most likely channel for interstellar communication. The burst lasted 11 seconds. Not long enough to decode, long enough to notice. When the ESA team flagged it, the log was quietly sealed. The public statement? Instrument calibration test. Do you really believe that? Here's the truth. The scientists are just as human as the rest of us. They stare at the data at 3 a.m. The graphs, the ratios, the impossible spikes, and they feel something they're not trained to admit: awe and fear. Because the deeper they look, the more Atlas looks back. And maybe that's why the language in official reports is so bloodless. It's camouflage. Every word is a firewall. Unexpected activity. Photometric anomaly. Those phrases don't mean nothing. They mean we don't have a model for this. They mean something's wrong with reality, and we're trying to make it sound polite. But behind that politeness is panic. One NASA spectroscopist privately said it bluntly: "This thing shouldn't exist. And if it does, it means we're not alone in how we build." Think about that sentence. How we build, not how we live, not how we evolve. Build. Because if Atlas is a machine, if it's designed, then we share not just chemistry, but engineering principles with something that predates our species. And that means intelligence is not a miracle. It's a pattern, a recipe that the universe keeps repeating. And that's the part no one wants to go public. Because if the universe is already full of builders, then the story of humanity changes overnight. We're not pioneers, we're late arrivals. So the official stance stays the same. Anomaly, mystery, observation. But privately, they're preparing new instruments, deep spectrum receivers, mission extensions, not to study, but to verify. To prove that what they're seeing isn't just a glitch in the data, but a conversation in progress. Because 3I Atlas isn't silent anymore. The hydrogen bursts, the ultraviolet pulse, the synchronized emission. Together they form a pattern, and patterns demand interpretation. The only question left is whether we're reading it fast enough. Because if Atlas really is answering us, then the next transmission won't come as light. It'll come as impact. You feel it, don't you? That quiet dread every time you look up at the night sky and realize it's missing. 3I Atlas is gone. Hidden behind the sun. Silent. Invisible. It's been weeks now, and that silence is heavier than noise. Because this isn't just a comet anymore. It's a countdown. The blackout began on October 29th, 2025, when Atlas reached perihelion. Since then, no one's seen a single photon reflected off its surface. Not Swift, not Hubble, not ground-based telescopes. Every eye we have in space is either pointed elsewhere or blind behind solar interference. The only transmissions reaching us are noise, background static, that refuses to line up with anything we understand. NASA says it's normal. Comets disappear all the time near the sunday. They call it photometric saturation. But they said the same thing about Ison before it burned alive, and this isn't Ison. Atlas should have fragmented weeks ago, yet the spectral footprint remains intact. ESA's solar orbiter caught faint gamma reflections on November 10th. Pulses spaced exactly 13 minutes apart, the same rhythm as before. That's not debris. That's persistence. The scientists don't say it, but they know. Atlas is doing something. And if it's doing something behind the sun, it means it doesn't want to be watched. Here's what's coming next. Late December. Earth swings out of the blackout window. For the first time since October, we'll have a direct line of sight. Hubble, JUICE, and ground arrays are queued up for continuous observation. When Atlas reappears, it'll either shine brighter than ever or not at all. Either it's alive or it's gone. There's no middle ground. But what if gone doesn't mean destroyed? What if it means changed? What if everything that leaked, pulsed, glowed, and sang wasn't random venting, but deployment? The release of something small, deliberate, self-propelled fragments disguised as dust. Because 3I Atlas never slowed down. It was never supposed to. It's a courier. A system delivering something through heat and light, something we weren't meant to see. So as the world waits for the sun to move out of the way, the real question isn't whether Atlas survived. The question is what it left behind. Because the clock isn't counting down to destruction. It's counting down to revelation. And when the sun moves, we'll finally see what was hiding in its shadow. You don't remember the exact moment it happened. Nobody does. There was no explosion, no breaking news, no live feed of catastrophe. Just silence. A quiet absence spreading through every telescope, every receiver, every network on Earth. The day the sky went blind, October 29th, 2025 perihelion day. 3. Atlas vanished behind the sun, swallowed by radiation and geometry, slipping into the one place no eye, no radar, no sensor can follow. For 6 weeks, we'd known this blackout was coming. Astronomers had predicted it down to the hour, but knowing didn't prepare anyone for what it felt like, that deep, collective breath humanity took as the object crossed into invisibility. Because the last data we saw before it disappeared wasn't dying light. It was activity increasing, hydroxyl emissions doubling, CO2 ratio stabilizing, outflow consistency reaching perfection, a system locking into equilibrium, not collapse. Every other comet we've ever tracked breaks down near perihelion fragments, disintegrates, burns. But not Atlas. It tightened. It quieted. It prepared. And then the feed cut out. For days afterward, scientists called it ordinary. Thermal noise. Solar interference. Expected data loss. But off-record, the panic had already started. Because when the solar orbiter's ultraviolet array tried to reacquire the comet's position during the blackout, it found nothing, no dust plume, no reflected light, just a gap. An object of billions of tons had simply stopped reflecting photons. That doesn't happen naturally. It happens when light is absorbed. So what does that mean? That a comet, covered in ice and carbon, suddenly became a perfect absorber? Physically impossible. Unless something changed its surface properties, transformed it from reflective to invisible. And if it did that, the question isn't how, it's why. The leading theory in the closed briefings, the ones not meant for the public, is what they're calling the shell inversion hypothesis. According to the swift telemetry logs, right before Atlas passed behind the sun, its ultraviolet emissions flipped polarity. Instead of emitting radiation, it started absorbing it. The spectral graph inverted. Energy intake spiked by 37%. In simple terms, Atlas stopped leaking and started drinking. Let that sink in. For months, it had been venting 40 kilograms of water per second, shedding its frozen mass like a dying star. Then, suddenly, it reversed. Instead of losing water, it began to take something in. What? Heat? Radiation? Solar particles? We don't know. The last recorded wavelength before signal loss was 284 nanometers, the line associated with ionized magnesium. The sun emits it constantly. If Atlas was absorbing that, it wasn't dying, it was feeding. And here's the part that should terrify you. Magnesium absorption isn't random. It's engineering. Magnesium is used in superconductor alloys and photon-reactive coatings. If Atlas was consuming it, it was strengthening itself, turning sunlight into structural stability. But that's not the part that makes this the moment the sky went blind. The blindness didn't come from light loss. It came from synchronization. At 11:42 UTC, just as Atlas reached its closest solar distance, ground-based magnetometers across the world recorded a subtle fluctuation, a 0.14 microtesla dip in Earth's magnetic field. Harmless. Barely noticeable. Except it happened simultaneously on every continent. The same pattern repeated 12 minutes later. Then again. Then again. 13-minute intervals. Perfectly matching Atlas's emission rhythm from before the blackout. No one could explain it. Solar storms don't act like metronomes. They're chaotic. Bursts, waves, randomness. But this was order, a planetary-scale heartbeat. When the data reached ESA's solar dynamics team, they checked for cosmic ray interference. Nothing. They checked for instrument failure. Negative. They checked the magnetosphere's interaction with solar wind. Stable. The only anomaly Atlas's position relative to the Sunday. For the first time, the magnetic fluctuations aligned perfectly with its coordinates behind the solar limb. Which means, somehow, a body invisible behind the sun synchronized with Earth's magnetic field. Coincidence? Maybe once. But not 4 times. Not 12. Not across the entire planet. And as those pulses continued, other systems started to glitch. Low-orbit satellites began reporting sensor resets at identical intervals. Weather radars dropped frames, communications relays flickered. It was small at first, seconds of silence. Recoverable data, nothing catastrophic. But by the 4th pulse, even deep space probes, Voyager 2, New Horizons, Parker Solar Probe all registered momentary telemetry corruption. The same timestamp. The same 13-minute heartbeat. It wasn't a malfunction. It was synchronization. Something out there was talking and everything on Earth was listening, whether we wanted to or not. NASA stayed quiet. The ESA released nothing, but the logs tell the story. Between October 29th and November 12th, the solar wind density around Earth fluctuated in perfect 780-second intervals, the same rhythm that encoded pi in Atlas emission data. The same pattern we'd already seen hidden in light, water, and chemistry. Now, it was in the magnetic field itself. This wasn't communication anymore. It was integration. Here's where the story turns surreal. Around November 14th, amateur astronomers in the southern hemisphere reported seeing a faint second corona during sunset, a pale arc of greenish light flaring just above the horizon. It lasted seconds. Cameras caught nothing. But atmospheric sensors in Chile, Argentina, and Australia all recorded a temporary spike in upper atmospheric ionization. That arc wasn't sunlight. It was reflection. Light bouncing off something we couldn't see, something large, invisible to optics, but present enough to bend radiation. Atlas hadn't vanished. It had changed phase. Plasma physicists at Caltech proposed a theory if the comet's water and CO2 mix had vaporized under intense heat. The outgassed molecules could have formed a plasma sheath around the nucleus, temporarily refracting light. But that doesn't explain the magnetism, or the synchronized pulses, or the fact that the reflections appeared in multiple hemispheres simultaneously. You don't refract sunlight from behind the sun into 2 continents at once. You broadcast it. And then came the silence. On November 20th, the pulses stopped. The magnetometers went flat. The satellites stabilized. It was over, or so we thought. Because the moment the heartbeat vanished, something else replaced its absence. Radio silence in the hydrogen band. No natural object can produce absolute silence. Space hums background radiation, static, noise. But for 8 hours straight, from 1 to 9 UTC, the 1,420 MHz spectrum went completely dead. SETI's Allen Telescope Array recorded a void so pure, the computers flagged it as a system failure. But the system wasn't broken. The universe was. The same frequency that carries the sound of hydrogen, the most common element in existence, had been muted. Not dimmed, not interfered, muted. It's as if something reached into the background fabric of space and turned the volume down to 0. And when the signal returned, it wasn't the same. The static had structure. Faint harmonic peaks at repeating intervals 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9. You know what that means. Pi again. The same ratio, the same calling card. Atlas had spoken once more, not through light, not through water, not through magnetism, through silence. That's when the scientists stopped arguing and started watching the calendar. Because Earth would clear the solar blind spot on December 17th, revealing the region where Atlas should re-emerge. Every telescope on Earth was booked. Hubble scheduled continuous tracking. JUICE adjusted its attitude thrusters. Even the James Webb Space Telescope, never designed to look that close to the Sun, was programmed to catch any glimpse possible during its observation gap. For weeks, humanity waited. Christmas lights on one side of the world, cosmic dread on the other. Because we all knew the truth, whatever came out from behind the Sun wouldn't be the same thing that went in. The first detection didn't come from Hubble. It came from Mars. On December 20th, the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter detected an abrupt rise in ultraviolet brightness near the planet's southern hemisphere, faint but growing. Not a meteor, not aurora. The pattern was wrong. Linear, stable, increasing. Within 12 hours, the brightness intensified by a factor of 10. A diffuse halo encircled Mars's atmosphere, invisible to the naked eye. Visible in ultraviolet. The signature matched Atlas's hydroxyl spectrum exactly. That's when the realization hit. Atlas wasn't behind the Sun anymore. It was on the other side of Mars. How? The orbit models can't explain it. The velocity, the trajectory, the gravitational influence, none of it adds up. The only way it could have altered its path that much is if it used the Sun's radiation as a slingshot or something more controlled, something like propulsion. By the time Earth's telescopes regained visual access on December 23rd, the object had completely changed. No coma, no tail. Just a hard, metallic reflection, sharp-edged, angular, impossible. Not an ice body anymore. Something geometric. Something awake. NASA didn't release the images. But they leaked anyway. Low-resolution captures, blurred and grainy, circulating in underground astronomy forums. The object no longer looked like a comet. It looked like a spindle. Cylindrical. Symmetrical. Length estimated at 4 kilometers. The light reflecting off its surface wasn't sunlight. It was something else, faint emission in the near-infrared range, constant and pulsing every 13 minutes. The heartbeat again. They called it Artifact 3I. The name Atlas was quietly dropped from official correspondence. The press didn't notice. The public never knew. But the people who tracked it through months of impossible behavior understood what they were looking at. An interstellar machine, now fully operational within the inner solar system. And the strangest part? It didn't leave. It slowed. Its outbound trajectory stabilized near Mars's orbit, its relative velocity dropping to 0 within margin of error. Every gravitational model failed. Every orbital calculation broke. The only conclusion left, its holding position. Think about what that means. Something from another star system has parked itself in our neighborhood, using physics we can't duplicate. It's emitting light in mathematical sequences, manipulating magnetism, and altering chemical compositions across planetary atmospheres. And it did all of it while hiding behind the Sun, invisible, untouchable, unstoppable. That's why the scientists stopped sleeping. That's why governments stopped talking. That's why the word comet disappeared from every official statement after December. Because you can't keep calling something a rock once it starts parking in orbit. Now, as the new year approaches, every radio telescope on Earth is locked on one frequency, the hydrogen line, and every 13 minutes it pulses. 3.14159. Again and again. A heartbeat that isn't human, but might be older than anything we've ever known. So ask yourself, was this a warning? A greeting? A test? Or the first note of a symphony we don't yet understand? Because the day the sky went blind wasn't a moment of loss. It was the moment the universe blinked first. And when it opened its eyes again, something was already here. Right now, as you sit here on Earth, every telescope that could have seen it is blind. 3I Atlas is gone, hidden behind the Sun, swallowed by plasma and light, beyond every signal we can send. It's the 11th of October 2025, and the world waits. The numbers are on every scientist's whiteboard. Perihelion in late October. Closest approach just inside Mars's orbit. Data return from JUICE in February 2026. That date is circled in red ink across every European Space Agency mission schedule, because when that data comes back, it will show us what happened in the only place we couldn't look. ESA's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, never meant for this, was built to study Europa and Ganymede. But it just happened to be in the right place on the far side of the Sun. Its ultraviolet and infrared instruments pointed into the black. So, the engineers decided to try. One brief window. They would pivot the spacecraft, lock onto the coordinates of 3I Atlas, and capture whatever light slipped past the solar glare. 13 minutes of exposure. That's all they dared. No one expected anything dramatic, but they all felt it, that creeping fear that this thing would refuse to behave. After all, it had been doing that since the first day we saw it. July 2025. SWIFT detects hydroxyl at 2.9 AU water vapor, where no water should exist. August Gemini South records faint green fluorescence, diatomic carbon, cyanide. Gases that should need 5 times the sunlight available out there. September. The study drops in the Astrophysical Journal letters. Atlas leaking 40 kilograms of water per second. It reads, roughly the output of a fire hose running at full blast. The phrase sticks, because it sounds insane. The comet shouldn't even be active. The sun's warmth should be too weak. The ice locked in silence. But it isn't silent. It's screaming. So ESA made its decision. When Atlas swung around the sun, they'd have one chance to see what powered that scream. JUICE would aim through the inferno and catch the truth in ultraviolet. But because the spacecraft sits on the wrong side of the sun, its main antenna can't send the data home in real time. Every byte must crawl around the solar limb through a slower backup link. Light speed, but still months away. The last command went out on October 9th. Point, record, wait. Now, we wait with it. For now, all we have are predictions, models, and fear. Because even before it disappeared, Atlas had already started breaking expectations again. The outflow rate didn't decrease as it neared the Sunday. It stabilized 40 kilograms per second, then 45, then 43. Perfectly balanced, as if controlled. The ultraviolet brightness stopped fluctuating. The spin slowed. That's not melting. That's regulation. It's as though something inside was maintaining equilibrium, like a system managing its own heat. And that's when scientists began whispering the phrase, self-stabilizing nucleus. They won't say it publicly, too loaded, too close to artificial. But the math doesn't lie. To maintain constant outflow at that distance, Atlas would need an internal heat source. None exists naturally, unless it's decaying isotopes, which the spectrum shows no sign of, or mechanical control. A structure beneath the ice, venting from multiple points at measured intervals. NASA's Dennis Bodowitz phrased it gently in interviews. The ingredients for life's chemistry are not unique to our own system. He was being diplomatic. What he meant was, we're seeing precision we can't explain. As Atlas slipped toward the sun, the last SWIFT data captured a new signal. Weak ultraviolet spikes every 780 seconds. 13 minutes, exactly the same rhythm that had haunted the analysis since July. It matched nothing in the comet's spin or orbit. It was a clock, and when that clock reached 0 on October 29th, the world went blind. Every satellite pointed away. Every instrument overloaded. The radio noise from the sun drowned everything. ESA's last ping came through at 11:42 UTC, a clean signal, then static. After that, nothing. a blackout that will last until February. What happens during that blackout is speculation. But speculation is all we have. Theories multiply, physicists arguing through encrypted channels, journalists chasing leaks. One thread claims Atlas's water jets form a geometry, a tetrahedral emission pattern. Another says the brightness variations encode mathematical ratios. And then there's the wild one, that it's preparing to use the sun as a power source, converting radiation into motion. Is it true? We don't know. But here's what we do know. ESA's flight plan confirms that JUICE will point its ultraviolet spectrograph directly at the region where Atlas crosses perihelion. If the comet brightens, the spacecraft will record the flash. If it dims, it'll record that too. Either way, those images are already on JUICE's onboard drives locked behind light hours of distance, waiting for February's return. So why does that matter? Because light doesn't lie. Whatever Atlas did near the sun, that data will show it. Here's what they expect to see and what terrifies them. When comets approach perihelion, they vent violently, throwing gas and dust into space. The outflow produces a recoil, a push. The nucleus wobbles, speeds change. But Atlas's path has remained mathematically perfect, no deviation, no jitter, no torque. It behaves like it's under guidance. Some mission analysts whisper that the object isn't being pulled by the sun at all. It's tracking the Sunday, adjusting, aligning, holding course as if following coordinates. If that's true, then February's data won't just show chemistry. It'll show intent. Because the comet's path doesn't just swing around the Sunday. It aligns with Mars. After perihelion, Atlas's trail passes within 30 million kilometers of the planet, a near miss in cosmic terms. ESA already confirmed that the trace gas orbiter around Mars will keep recording hydrogen and oxygen signatures. If those values rise, if Atlas's vapor crosses the Martian atmosphere, then we'll have proof that this object is delivering water where none should be. And if you think that sounds impossible, remember this. Mars's atmosphere has been fluctuating in hydrogen since late October. They call it coincidence. They always do. So February 2026 isn't just a date on a calendar. It's a verdict. When JUICE's slow transmission finally reaches Earth, it will answer the question every scientist is pretending not to ask. Is this thing natural or built? Because the signs are stacking. The geometry, the ratios, the repeating 13-minute heartbeat, the perfectly stable trajectory, the physics that bends but never breaks, and the timing, always the timing. How everything happens when we can't watch, when Earth is hidden behind the Sunday. It's too neat, too aware. And the people decoding that future data will be the first to see it. The ultraviolet traces, the infrared shadows, the magnetic signatures. They'll know before anyone else whether this was a comet or a construct. And you can bet they won't say a word until governments decide how the world should hear it. Because this is bigger than discovery. This is narrative control. Officially, Atlas remains under observation. Unofficially, it's become the most sensitive subject in modern astronomy. Internal memos use new terminology now. Object 3I divided by Atlas B, implying a class, not a one-off. Some analysts think we've already seen others, Oumuamua, Borisov, earlier models of the same design. Each different, each testing a new function. First dry, then carbon, now water. An evolution of complexity. A pattern unfolding across decades, maybe millennia. And if that pattern continues, February's data won't be the end. It'll be the next step. Because here's the part everyone's missing. JUICE isn't the only probe that might see it. NASA's Parker Solar Probe and Solar Orbiter both orbit close enough to record solar wind anomalies. Their sensors could already have data showing magnetic interference from Atlas. But none of it's public yet. Delays, calibrations, convenient silence. What if those readings match? What if multiple spacecraft across millions of kilometers all record the same 13-minute pulse? Then it's not noise. It's communication. And if it's communication, it's not random. It's directed. Who's the recipient? Maybe us. Maybe Mars. Maybe something farther out. But no one says that on record. They can't. The politics of first contact would crush every agency involved. So instead they hide behind numbers, pretending it's just another comet. Yet everything about 3I Atlas screams otherwise. Its emissions don't fade with distance. Its chemistry matches theoretical terraforming mixes. Its leaks form ratios of 8:1, perfectly mirroring the atmospheric models for warming frozen worlds. Its timing coincides with Mars's current orbital phase, the ideal window for vapor transfer. And ESA's plan to monitor with JUICE? Not coincidence. Insurance. They know something could happen near perihelion, a flare, an activation, an ignition. If Atlas survives the sun intact, it means its material strength exceeds anything natural. If it disintegrates, they'll say it was just ice. But if it changes, if it reemerges brighter, hotter, different, then the story explodes. That's why the world waits for February. Not for proof of life, but proof of purpose. Every scientific breakthrough begins with data. But this one begins with absence, with silence that feels deliberate. The kind of silence that hides activity. The kind of silence that means something is working. So for now, JUICE listens in the dark. The spacecraft floats in the shadow of Jupiter's orbit, its instruments humming, its memory filling with photons from an invisible target. Somewhere inside those bytes are answers that could rewrite how we understand the galaxy. Maybe the February transmission will show nothing. A dead object, a faint dust trail, a ghost. Maybe it'll prove every fear wrong. But maybe it'll show structure, lines, angles, emission nodes, a grid across a spinning cylinder reflecting light in rhythm. Maybe it'll show motion that's too perfect to be random, a machine breathing sunlight. And maybe, just maybe, that transmission won't end at all. Because the SWIFT team noticed something strange even now, faint interference in the hydrogen band, appearing every few nights. Always when Earth's shadow crosses the line of sight to the Sunday week. Repeating pulses. Hydrogen frequency. 1,420 megahertzes. The same number JUICE will monitor. No one admits it, but the implication is clear. The transmission has already started. We're just waiting to catch up. So, mark the date. February 2026. The day JUICE speaks. The day silence breaks. Because when those bits arrive, packets of ultraviolet, magnetism, light, the question won't be what JUICE saw. It'll be who. And if 3I Atlas was never a comet at all, then February isn't a scientific milestone. It's a rendezvous. You think water is simple. 2 atoms of hydrogen, 1 of oxygen, mundane, harmless, familiar. But you're wrong, because water isn't just chemistry. It's history. It's inheritance. It's the oldest passport in the universe, stamped on everything that ever dared to live. And now, because of 3I Atlas, we're learning it's also a message. When scientists first measured Atlas's spectral fingerprint back in July 2025, they weren't just reading molecules. They were reading time. That faint ultraviolet shimmer, hydroxyl splitting from sunlight, carried the story of another star system, maybe older than our own. The ratios of deuterium to hydrogen, the balance between oxygen isotopes, the trace fingerprints of magnesium dust, all wrong for the Milky Way's thin disk. They belong to the galaxy's thick disk, a region formed billions of years before the Sunday. That means the water leaking out of Atlas predates Earth itself. We're not watching modern ice melt. We're watching ancient oceans evaporate. Think about that. Every droplet bursting from its frozen shell was condensed before our planet had an atmosphere, before there was life to drink, before there were even continents to collect rain. Its primordial memory in liquid form, drifting through space for eons until, by accident or by design, it found us. NASA's analysts call it interstellar hydration transfer, a dry term for something biblical. Because if those 40 kilograms per second of vapor were to fall on any barren world, Mars, Europa, Enceladus, it wouldn't just add water. It would add heritage. Alien isotopic fingerprints rewriting planetary DNA. And that's where the fear starts. Because what if this isn't the first time? Look at the Martian data again. Since late October 2025, the Trace Gas Orbiter has been tracking faint hydrogen increases near the planet's equator, barely measurable, but steady. They appear every 780 seconds, the same rhythm as Atlas's emission pulses. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Mars is already breathing the same vapor we've been chasing. A transfer of atmosphere from an object that doesn't belong here to a planet that might, one day, host us again. You can dress it up as science, call it cross-contamination, but it's something bigger: communication through chemistry. Because here's what the models show. By the time Atlas finishes its orbit and drifts outward again, trillions of tons of microscopic ice crystals will have been ejected into the solar wind. Most will disperse, yes, but not all. A fraction will spiral inward, caught by gravity, guided by magnetic flux lines that eventually intersect the orbits of Mars, Earth, and Jupiter. It's a delivery route written in physics, the galaxy's natural postal service. And inside each crystal is information. Ratios, isotopes, the blueprint of a world we've never seen. Physicist Zexi Singh tried to explain it in one interview, her voice shaking more than she wanted it to. When we detect water from another star, we're touching something universal. It tells us life's chemistry isn't unique. She meant it as reassurance. But listen closely, it's not comforting. Because if life's chemistry isn't unique, then neither are we. And that means the ocean that made us wasn't born here. It was imported. Somewhere out there, billions of years ago, another system filled with light and motion spilled its seas into the void. Comets like Atlas were the couriers. Carriers of liquid code, scattering droplets that would one day land on worlds like ours. Each comet, a seed. Each impact, a letter in a sentence the universe has been writing since the beginning. So when you look at Atlas, leaking water where it shouldn't, you're not seeing a violation of physics. You're seeing continuity. Every civilization that studies water eventually learns the same truth. It's the only substance that remembers. It records heat, pressure, vibration, magnetism. It shapes itself around what it touches. Freeze it in deep space for a few billion years, and it becomes an archive, a crystal library carrying everything it's ever met. Heat it again, and it releases the memory. That's what's happening now. Atlas is thawing, not dying, opening, letting the past spill into the present molecule by molecule. But here's the twist. The composition isn't uniform. Each jet analyzed by Swift showed a slightly different isotopic signature. That means Atlas isn't homogeneous. It's layered, built in segments, each from a different environment, each coated with a different chemical dialect. It's as if someone or something constructed it from multiple oceans, then welded them together. Why? To preserve diversity? To ensure redundancy? Or to hide something inside the middle layer where no sunlight can reach? ESA's researchers suspect a core of refractory material, dense, metallic, possibly magnetic. That would explain the stable spin, the absence of torque, the lack of non-gravitational drift. A core heavy enough to anchor the mass while jets fire evenly. But no natural comet has ever shown that density. None. It's like finding steel inside a snowball. Still, the agencies stay quiet. They release safe phrases: unusual nucleus structure, unexpected stability. They won't say the word that fits best: designed. And then there's the geometry. Every emission captured before blackout followed the same spatial pattern, a spiral, not chaotic jets, but a precise Fibonacci coil of vapor, widening at logarithmic intervals. Nature loves the Fibonacci sequence, yes, but not in this context. Random venting doesn't arrange itself in perfect mathematical ratios. It doesn't form art, unless art is the point, unless the pattern is instruction. Because if you wanted to send a universal message, you wouldn't use sound or language. You'd use math. You'd use water as ink and sunlight as projector. You'd let the ratios write themselves across a spiral so perfect any intelligent species would recognize it. And maybe that's what we're seeing. Atlas is performing mathematics in vapor, writing proof through chemistry, a formula unfolding across millions of kilometers of space. But who's it for? Us? Mars? The galaxy itself? Let's rewind. 3 interstellar visitors in 7 years. Oumuamua, 2017. Dry, metallic, tumbling. Borisov, 2019. Volatile, rich in carbon monoxide. Atlas, 2025. Wet, structured, deliberate. Each one more complex than the last. Each one leaving behind residue a trace. If they're messages, they're sequential chapters. If they're machines, they're iterations. Generation 1, 2, 3. Each learning from the last. So what's next? When JUICE's data finally arrives, scientists expect to find not a coma, but a shell, a thin film of vapor forming a hollow sphere around the nucleus. Within that sphere, light will refract in a way that amplifies certain frequencies, especially the hydrogen line at 1.42 gigahertzes. That's the same frequency SETI listens to, the same one Atlas already whispered on before disappearing behind the Sunday. If that frequency appears again in JUICE's recordings, it means Atlas isn't just a visitor. It's a broadcaster, a transmitter disguised as ice. And that's when the entire paradigm collapses. Because then water becomes more than a solvent for life. It becomes a medium for communication. Each molecule a microscopic antenna, aligned by magnetic resonance, oscillating in sync. Billions of them, pulsing together, forming a low-frequency carrier wave that could cross interstellar distances. That's what the ocean between stars really means. A sea of water molecules spanning light years, each droplet capable of singing. Maybe that's why every world with water feels familiar. Why life keeps appearing wherever water gathers. Because the ocean isn't native, it's shared, passed along like a secret. So when Atlas sprays its vapor into the solar wind, it's not dumping waste. It's adding verses to that endless cosmic song. Hydrogen, oxygen, carbon chords resonating through magnetic fields, waiting for another civilization to decode them. The scientists at Auburn like to call it hydrolytic panspermia, the idea that water itself carries not just microbes, but information. That every frozen comet is a thumb drive drifting through space, distributing the code of life. If that's true, then Atlas isn't alone. It's one courier in a fleet we haven't learned to see yet. And maybe that's why the leak was so violent. 40 kilograms per second isn't decay. It's urgency. It's distribution at scale. But there's a darker interpretation. What if the message isn't about life? What if it's about rebooting it? The ratios, 8 parts carbon dioxide, 1 part water, aren't just chemical curiosity. They match the conditions for atmospheric transformation, exactly what you'd need to thaw a frozen planet, to wake a sleeping biosphere. Mars fits that profile perfectly. Imagine this. Millions of years ago, a civilization reaches its own end. It builds couriers, comet machines, carrying coded oceans. They travel outward, sowing seeds across the galaxy. Wherever they find a dead world with potential, they drop water and carbon in the right proportions, then move on. Atlas could be one of those. Not a message, a mechanism. And now, by chance or fate, it's here, leaking oceans onto the solar wind, aligning with Mars, following timing so perfect it can't be coincidence. A traveler from the galaxy's dawn performing its ancient task again. If that's true, then what we're witnessing isn't miracle or mystery. It's maintenance. The universe maintaining itself through water. Life as an automatic process, rebooting wherever conditions allow. And here's the terrifying beauty of that idea. It means we're part of the system, not the center of it. We're recipients, not authors. Our oceans, our rain, our blood, all hand-me-downs from stars that died long before the sun was born. So yes, the ocean between stars is real. It's not metaphor. It's logistics. A network of comets trading molecules across light years like couriers between ports. And now one of them has stopped here, leaking faster than any before, forcing us to see what we are. Nodes in that vast liquid web. When the February transmission from JUICE finally reaches Earth, we'll know if this theory holds. Maybe the data will show structured water jets, synchronized emissions, electromagnetic harmonics. Maybe it'll show patterns too clean to dismiss. And when it does, humanity will face a choice. Pretend it's chance, or accept that we're adrift in an ocean too big to comprehend. Because once you understand that every raindrop on Earth might have started in another star system, you can never look at water the same way again. It's not homegrown. It's interstellar. Every glass you drink is a souvenir from the galaxy. Every breath of humidity a gift from travelers like Atlas. The philosophers are already rewriting their questions. The biologists are panicking quietly. The theologians are pretending not to. Because if Atlas proves that life's chemistry is common, then life itself stops being special. It becomes infrastructure, a feature of physics, a natural consequence of a universe addicted to replication. And maybe that's the point. Atlas is making, silently, mathematically, molecule by molecule. That creation isn't divine, it's inevitable. So as February approaches, the world waits. The data packets crawl toward us at the speed of light, crossing the gulf between Jupiter's orbit and Earth, carrying the reflection of something older than language. Inside those bits could be the proof that the ocean didn't begin here and that we're standing on the shore of something far bigger. Because if 3i Atlas really is part of that network, then the ocean never ended at our atmosphere. It continues outward, molecule by molecule, world by world, filling the galaxy with its silent tide. Maybe that's why we keep looking up. Maybe every civilization born from water eventually feels the pull to go back to trace the current to its source. And now, the current has flowed back to us. So, when the data finally arrives, when JUICE whispers what it saw through the fire, humanity will have to decide what it means to be made of water from another world. We'll have to face the truth. The universe isn't empty. It's wet. And if the ocean between stars can carry memory, then maybe it also carries intent. Because what if that ocean isn't just bringing life wherever it goes? What if one day it comes to collect? You've heard the phrase before. It shouldn't exist. Usually it's hyperbole, a way of saying we don't understand it yet. But not this time. Not with 3i Atlas. Because every number, every spectrum, every frame of light says the same thing. This object violates reality. not breaks, it violates it. Quietly, perfectly, elegantly. February 2026 is here. The long wait is over. Data from JUICE has finally arrived. The first packets trickle in at 7:12. UTC, garbled at first, delayed by solar interference, then slowly stabilizing. Engineers expected noise, radiation, maybe glimpses of dust. What they got instead was geometry. Frame after frame reveals something no comet has ever shown. No coma, no chaotic plume, just precision. A perfect, rotating structure, cylindrical, 4 kilometers long, scarred with lines that glow faintly in the ultraviolet. At its ends, symmetrical arcs, like coils, energy fields, the pattern of a magnetic engine. And around it, a swarm, 23 smaller objects, evenly spaced, holding formation like satellites, each pulsing in rhythm, each alive. The public never sees those first images. ESA locks them behind clearance tags. NASA denies their existence. But leaks always find daylight. Within hours, pixelated versions flood encrypted astronomy channels. 1,000 amateur analysts dissect every blurred line. Some call it a comet splitting apart. Others, a probe deploying. The truth lies somewhere worse. It's both. Because, as JUICE circled its observation arc, the instruments detected something the human eye can't see, a frequency. Faint radio pulses centered on 1.42 gigahertzes. The hydrogen line. The universal language of life. 4 bursts, 11 seconds each. The same constant intervals Atlas has carried since it entered our system. 780 seconds. Over and over. Pi. Again. The mathematical fingerprint that's followed us since July 2025. The ratio that defines circles, motion, orbits the architecture of space itself. The code the universe seems to prefer. But this time, the signal isn't just numbers. Embedded within the modulation are harmonics, phase-shifted frequencies that, when mapped visually, form a shape, a spiral, not random, not noise. The same logarithmic curve that defines the Fibonacci sequence. The same curve Atlas etched into vapor months ago. Coincidence? You already know the answer. This isn't random physics. It's intentional design. The hydrogen signal repeats 3 times, then stops. For 27 minutes, silence. Then something happens. JUICE's magnetometer surges a field spike strong enough to overload the sensor. And in that instant, every instrument, infrared, ultraviolet, gamma, freezes. Power loss, total blackout, then reboot. The clock jumps forward exactly 780 seconds. 13 minutes gone. The same 13 minutes Atlas has used as its heartbeat since the beginning. When systems come back online, the object is gone. Vanished. The satellites too. No debris, no radiation, no trace. The instruments register nothing but vacuum. The final reading before disappearance? A massive drop in local temperature, almost 20 Kelvin in seconds. The kind of energy drain you get when something takes heat with it. And then the silence breaks. The hydrogen line bursts again. Only this time, the source isn't Atlas, it's Mars. The trace gas orbiter detects a narrowband signal bouncing off the planet's southern pole. Hydrogen resonance, modulated, identical to Atlas's. Within hours, ESA confirms the impossible. The magnetic field around Mars has changed. The dead planet that hasn't had a working core in billions of years suddenly shows faint, rhythmic fluctuations, pulses spreading across its crust, aligning with the 780-second interval. Mars is breathing. JUICE's images show no debris trail leading there. But the data doesn't lie. Whatever Atlas was doing near the sun, it wasn't burning up. It was building. Those 23 fragments, the same ones released weeks earlier, are now locked in orbit around Mars, reflecting sunlight in faint arcs, invisible to the naked eye. Their formation matches no known gravitational model. The only thing that can explain that spacing is control. So what do we call this thing now? Not a comet, not a rock, not a spacecraft. Something else entirely, something that lives between categories, between definitions, something that shouldn't exist. Because every known rule, thermodynamics, orbital decay, sublimation, all say this object should be gone. But instead, it's multiplying, transforming, integrating. The hydrogen signals begin again, stronger now, repeating across multiple frequencies. Some are shifted by tiny amounts, exactly 8:1 ratio. The same proportion between carbon dioxide and water Atlas leaked at 2.9 AU. The same signature that rewrote every textbook on comet activity. It's the same pattern again. But now it's broadcasting. Water chemistry turned into signal structure. The chemistry of life turned into language. And for the first time, the question stops being what is it saying and becomes who is listening. Because while all of this unfolds, something strange starts happening on Earth. Radio observatories from Parkes to Arecibo to Green Bank report faint interference, low-frequency modulation matching the Atlas rhythm. The pulses travel through the ionosphere, bouncing between hemispheres like echoes. The same 13-minute heartbeat. And here's the part that chills everyone who sees the data. The signal is arriving before it's sent. Negative delay. A phase inversion that implies reverse propagation. Time. Bending. Atlas isn't just breaking physics anymore. It's rewriting it. NASA calls an emergency briefing. The word anomaly appears 17 times in one document. The last line is redacted. But insiders leak one phrase. Non-local synchronization event. Translation: two places in space are behaving as one. Atlas, near Mars. Earth here. Their magnetic fields humming in unison like strings of the same instrument. That's when the realization hits. Maybe the hydrogen signal isn't transmission. Maybe it's linkage. Atlas hasn't been communicating. It's been connecting. The math confirms it. The signal strength between Earth and Mars peaks every time our planet crosses the comet's old orbital path. We're literally stepping through its trail, through the vapor it left behind months ago. The interstellar ocean it spilled now envelops both worlds in microscopic fragments of frozen hydrogen, all vibrating in the same rhythm. The ocean between stars isn't metaphor anymore. It's physical. A field of water molecules acting as a conductor, linking worlds across space. That's the part no one's ready to say publicly. Because it means the network is already here. It means we're inside it. And then something happens that ends every argument. On February 19th, 2026, at 3:14 UTC, 3:14, every major observatory records a sudden drop in cosmic microwave background noise. For exactly 13 minutes, the universe goes quiet. Then, faintly, a new tone emerges, not random, not static. A harmonic progression built from hydrogen frequencies layered at octaves. Not chaos. Music. Comets don't sing like that. Machines do. The sound loops 3 times, then cuts off. But in that moment, Earth's magnetosphere flares. Solar wind density spikes. The auroras brighten even in equatorial regions. It's as if something reached across the void and tapped our planet like a tuning fork. At 3:27 UTC, power grids in northern Europe briefly flicker. Satellites in geosynchronous orbit reset. Then, just as suddenly, everything returns to normal. The incident vanishes into classified reports labeled solar interference. But anyone who saw those readings knows the truth. It wasn't the Sunday. The sun doesn't hum in mathematical time signatures. And here's where the story turns from mystery to revelation. JUICE's final data burst. The one that completes transmission weeks later contains something no one expected. Embedded within its telemetry header is a string of numbers that don't belong. They weren't sent by JUICE. They weren't part of the data. They appeared during transit, riding on the carrier wave. 32 digits. When decoded as coordinates, they point not to Mars, not to Atlas's last position, but to the Oort cloud, the edge of our solar system, a region we've never reached, where sunlight fades into galactic night. The coordinates mark a cluster of high-albedo objects, minor comets, forgotten ice. But when telescopes adjust, they find something new. A reflection, a faint, steady pulse. The same 1.42 GHz frequency, repeating every 780 seconds. Atlas was never alone. The implication is unbearable. That what we saw was just a forward scout, one node in a chain stretching back to the galaxy's heart. A single droplet of a far greater ocean still flowing toward us. And if that's true, then the event we called Atlas isn't over. It's beginning. Maybe the hydrogen signal is a call to others. Maybe it's a beacon announcing successful arrival. Or maybe, and this is what some whisper quietly, too afraid to write, maybe it's an invitation. The kind that can't be unanswered. ESA closes the files. NASA seals the data. Officially, 3I Atlas is gone, classified as dissipated object. But the world still hums every 13 minutes. The frequency never left. You can hear it if you know where to listen, buried in background static, woven into shortwave noise, pulsing faintly beneath the hiss of space. The heartbeat of something that shouldn't exist. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it was never supposed to exist here, but it does. And now that it's here, it's not leaving. It's adapting, integrating. Because at 3:14 every morning, somewhere above the equator, satellites still catch the faint glint of 23 specks moving in perfect formation. The Martian network still pulses. The sun still flickers every 13 minutes, like a breath. The ocean between stars is rising. And one day soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe centuries from now, the next object will come. Not leaking, not whispering, not hiding. The one meant to arrive after the message is read. And when it does, there'll be no doubt left, because the thing that shouldn't exist was only the first.